October 1986, my wife Mary and I, we went up to London, and we went to see the Mikado at the London Coliseum. Oh, it was a dank and dreary night. It was raining, but we were really looking forward to this. And we went into the auditorium, and it's a huge theatre. It had about 2,000 people there. But they were coughing and spluttering and sneezing. They must have had a lot of colds. And indeed, 3 days later, Mary and I got those colds, and we became really quite ill. We had a virus, and it really was a serious one. We were in bed initially for about 2 weeks with a high fever. Gradually, we started to recover, but in the event, Mary took almost 6 months to get back her health, whereas I never did. After about 4 weeks of the illness, I thought, well, I must be getting better. You know, you do after a viral illness. So I phoned up my doctor. I spoke to him, and he said, I think we need to take some bloods. They like bloods, do doctors. And I went along, and he had a look at me, and he said, oh, can't find out what's wrong. And we've had your bloods, and they're fine. I'll send you to a consultant. So a month later, I was at a local hospital and seeing this consultant. And I don't know if you've ever seen Carry On films, Carry On Nurse, Carry On Matron, but he was just out of that. He was amazing. He had a little dicky bow tie and a very posh voice. And he said, oh, Mr. Riley, he said, your bloods are fine. And you see, I've inspected you. You're okay. He said, what you need is lots of fresh air. He said, yes, that'll do it. Long walks in the countryside and you'll be fine. Well, at that stage in the illness, I thought consultants were gods, you know, way up there. So I thought, right, get home, go for a walk. And off I went for a walk when I got home. But within 200 yards, I collapsed. And I spent most of the next 7 years in bed. After about 3 or 4 months of being ill, Mary was reading the Sunday Times, and she came across an article called Yuppie Flu. I don't know if you remember Yuppie Flu. Us back in the 80s, guys, well, you may have heard of it. I thought, oh, I'm a yuppie. I've got all the same symptoms as they have. But right at the end of the article, there was a reference to a charity, the ME Association. So Mary phoned them up and said, can you help? And they said, yes, we have a specialist in the illness that you might have. He lives in Stanford-le-Hope in Essex. So another month later went by, and there I was in a consulting room in Stanford-le-Hope. And I met Dr. David Smith. He was a lovely guy. And he said, oh, I've seen many like you. And I said, well, what have I got? He said, well, we think you've got ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, otherwise known as chronic fatigue syndrome. I said, oh, right. I said, how long does it take to get over this? And he said, well, it could take up to 2 years, sometimes 4 years, and sometimes never. Well, you can imagine that was a tremendous shock to Mary and myself, because Mary really wanted to get me back to work, you know, and I wanted to get back to work, but it was not to be. So what is this illness? ME, CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. It has a history, and we can trace it back to about 1955. In that year, there was an outbreak at the Royal Free Hospital in London, and over 300 staff there were affected by an epidemic. It was a flu-type infection. 255 of those doctors, nurses, and ancillary staff eventually ended up in the same hospital, in the hospital beds in which they worked. They were very ill indeed. Some never recovered. In the same year, in Dalston in Cumbria and County Durham and in Durban, South Africa, there were similar outbreaks of a nasty virus, and they had the same problems. At the time, there was a physician there called Dr. Melvin Ramsey, a lovely guy, really intelligent, who wanted to get to the bottom of this illness. He then investigated that outbreak in London and in Dalston, and he found 3 distinct characteristics to ME, and they still are here to this day. The first is that there is a severe fatigue after infection. The fatigue comes when you do any sort of exercise. It may be just getting up in the morning and getting dressed. When you're really ill, that is exercise. The second symptom was that it could vary each day, this illness, and during the day. So one day you weren't too bad, the next you'd go under. And the third symptom was that there was a tendency to become a chronic illness. Now, if we'd have just had Dr. Melvin Ramsey, things might have been fine for us. But unfortunately, in 1970, 2 psychiatrists came along. They wanted to have a good look at the records of the Royal Free Hospital patients. And, oh, silly people there, they let them have them. They examined them. They couldn't find anything to do with a physical illness. So they decided that the people there were suffering from something called epidemic hysteria. You can imagine their minds whirring away, can't you? You can imagine that most of the patients at the Royal Free were women. They were the nurses, some of the doctors, and the ancillary staff. And they said, women, all in a confined environment. We think 1 or 2 had an illness and the rest were hysteric. They got hysteria and said they all had it as well. Their findings have set the tone for medical treatment ever since. And as I'll explain, first of all, who gets ME? Well, any one of you can. The most likely are, in fact, women. The ratio is something like 2 to 1 to men. We don't know why this is. It could be genetic. There could be a hormonal factor. We think a very strong idea behind it is that women do not rest. You probably all know that when us men get just a little cold, we have to go to bed. We've got man flu. And we rest, and often we recuperate, get back to work. But women, well, you have a tendency to keep going no matter what. You have a home to run. Perhaps you have children, young children to look after who are terribly hard work. And therefore you don't rest as you should. So you get up when you should stay in bed. And we think that's one of the reasons why it's become chronic in so many women. What are the ages when you get ME? There are 3, I was going to say popular ages, but it's never popular. 13 to 15 we find, and then 18 to 21. The 18 to 21 group are quite interesting because they often present with something called Epstein-Barr virus. This is glandular fever. You probably know it as, or most popularly known, the kissing disease. Many youngsters get it when they go off to college and university, and of course, they pass it round. And the next age is about 25 to 40, because then often we are starting out on our careers. We're working really hard. We may have a mortgage, or we may have young children, and they're all tremendous stressors on us. And we know that our immune system can be lessened, the effect of it, when we're under stress. So between those ages, that's another age that people get it. After 40, it's unusual, not unknown, but unusual. What are the symptoms? How will you know if you have ME? The main one is an overwhelming fatigue. You can't, until you've had it, you really can't imagine what it's like. It's not like going out for a run and coming back after 10 miles and think, whew, I'm tired. No, it goes right through every part of your body. And it's odd that it usually starts about 24 to 48 hours after you've exercised. By exercise, I mean that if you've been very ill with a virus, that merely means getting up in the morning, getting dressed and making breakfast. After that, you may have to go back to bed because you'll feel so tired. You'll have something that's known as brain fog. A mist will come over your brain and you won't be able to think. I remember when I was in the first years in bed, Mary was out at work and we had two young daughters who looked after me, and they'd come home from school about 3:45 and they'd bring me a cup of tea in bed. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember their names. My brain just couldn't engage, and this is one of the things that is so terrible about this illness. You will also have sleep disturbance. You'll never get a refreshing sleep at night. You'll wake up at all times. You'll have freezing hands. Oh, mine are freezing at the moment. And feet. So even on a 30 degrees Celsius day, you will feel freezing. And you'll have sensitivity to light and smells and sound. Really extreme ones. What causes ME? How will you get it? Invariably, it's by an infection. It can be a viral infection or bacterial. And you'll get it especially during a time of stress or anxiety when your immune system is lowered. Occasionally, it's been caused, we thought, by trauma. Perhaps a car accident, perhaps someone you love dearly has died, and you are so shocked that if you have an infection at the time, again, it's lowered your immune system and you can get this ME/CFS. Is there a cure? No. Oh, I wish there was. Do patients die of ME/CFS? No, not generally. There are a few cases where the death certificates have mentioned the illness, but this is usually in very severe cases where the person has been in bed for so long that they've lost so much muscle mass, and then they are susceptible to other infections, and then often it's pneumonia that brings about their end. Many more commit suicide, unfortunately, and this is common with all painful chronic long-term illnesses, especially if you get it when you're young. Just imagine your young life has been cut off very early and you're confined to home. You miss all your friends. They no longer can be with you. You can't be with them. And if you're on your own without a carer, you get very lonely and you get depressed. And that is a big problem for people with ME. Do people recover? Yes, it's not all doom and gloom. The younger you are, the better your chance of recovery. Many do recover, but again, many do not. The younger you are when you get it, the better your chance of recovery. And as with many illnesses, you can have cancer, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis. Sometimes people get spontaneous recovery. We don't know why it happens, but luckily for them, it does. So if you've got this illness and you go along to your GP and you say, look here, doc, what are you going to do about it? Well, he'll offer you two things. The first thing he'll offer you is something called CBT. You may have heard of it. It's cognitive behavior therapy. It's a talking therapy, and it's used for many chronic illnesses. It will help you cope with ME, but it won't treat and make you recover. Many psychiatrists and the medical profession today still believe that it will, but it won't. And it won't because you're under the reason why they give this CBT for ME/CFS is because of the psychiatrists back in the 1970s. They said that this was a misplaced illness belief. In other words, we think we're ill, but really we're not. And if they can use cognitive behavior therapy, persuade us that we're not ill, and get us into a well frame of mind, that will cure the underlying disease. Well, I only wish it would work like that. Oh, I do indeed. But unfortunately, it hasn't. And we have tens of thousands of ME patients who can testify that they have tried this therapy and it helps them cope, but it won't cure. And the other therapy that the NHS will offer you is something called GET, Graded Exercise Therapy. This is based on the fact that people, when they're ill in bed for a long time, lose their muscle mass. You, of course, will have read a lot recently about COVID-19. And they're finding that the patients coming out of the intensive care units there, they're losing 3% of their muscle mass every day that they are in there. So if you're in for 20 days, you're going to lose a huge amount of that energy, of that muscle mass, and you will be very weak indeed. Now, the treatment GET is based on the fact that you get out of bed, your legs are wobbly. Well, they will be. They haven't been used for so long. And if we can get you to exercise every day, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, going up gently slope, then you'll reach a plateau and you're well again. However, it doesn't work with ME because the chief complaint about ME is that if you exercise, you become more ill. So neither of the options that you'll be given by ME/CFS clinics, which incidentally you will find in the mental department of your local hospital, because that's what they think this illness is. You will find that if you try these exercises, it just won't work. So we recommend at the ME Association that you do something called pacing. Every day you listen to your body, you say, do you think I can make breakfast this morning? Can I do the washing up? Could I do the hoovering? Could I go to the shops? And each day will be different for you, and you have to adapt. So you pace yourself. I do pacing every day, and if Dave's phoning me at about 11:15 and 2:30 during the day, because I should be lying on a bed in a darkened room, pacing myself, just relaxing and letting my body heal in a way for the things I have to do later in the day. I'm delighted to say that the NHS will change and that the recommendations for the treatment that your GP will give you if you get this illness will change as well. In 2007, NICE, you may have heard of NICE, it's the National Institute for Clinical Care Excellence. And NICE is the God. It tells all GPs what treatment they give you, the patient. And it has told GPs to give people with ME since 2007, give them GET and CBT. We have been campaigning, and it's been a long campaign by charities against this guidance. We have finally got NICE to set up a new guidance committee. The leading ME specialist in this country is our medical advisor, Dr. Charles Shepherd, and he sits in with the committee and advises them about this illness. We are very hopeful that the committee will report in about 6 months' time, and we are very hopeful that they will withdraw the advice they give now to give GET, because we think it is counterintuitive. It will make you worse. There is a lot of research going on. There have been 4,000 research studies done on ME/CFS throughout the world. Japan, Australia, America has thrown lots of money at it, and that is proving quite successful. We haven't found a treatment yet, but we know the basis of what's going on in the body. The ME Association raises money for research in this country. And at the moment, we have 4 projects going on. We have one at Oxford University, at Leicester, in Newcastle, and we have one at Manchester. And one of the major things that we do is to fund a research into a biobank. Now, a biobank keeps the bloods of ME/CFS patients. We had 500 patients who all gave their bloods, and they are in this biobank. And it's run by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in London. We spend £80,000 a year on running this. And it's thanks to all the generosity of people that give to our charity and the legacies that they leave us that we can do this. So what does my charity do? Well, it does a number of things. And sometimes I wonder if we do affect people. But the other day, I had an email from someone, a member, somebody who just joined, a new member, and I'd like to read it out to you because it really struck home to me. And it goes like this. Dear ME Association, I have just received my membership pack and I have cried reading it. I have had ME for many years, but I've always felt to be ashamed because people look at me and don't believe it's a real illness. Why I have not joined earlier was because of my mum. She supported me throughout, but she died recently and I was alone. I therefore joined your charity. I would like to thank you for making me feel understood, for giving me support when I needed it. And when people say that ME is not an illness, having your information and support has given me the voice to say, yes, it is. And that email sums up why our charity is here. We support you. We have a 365-day charity telephone helpline. It's professionally managed, and we have 30 volunteers at the end of phone lines waiting for your call. We inform. We have over 80 leaflets. They're available for download on our website, and it tells you how to get through life with ME, because it's not just having an illness with ME, it's your whole life. So how do you get a blue badge, for example? How do you get the benefits you're entitled to? Because you can no longer work, our members just can't work anymore. And they've got a good job. They're teachers, nurses, all sorts of people. And now living has been taken away from them, so they need help. And we're there to do it. Our ME Facebook page is amazing. You ought to get on there and have a look. We have 2 young girls there who know all about social media, and they are wonderful. We have 21,000 followers on our Facebook page, and we are on Instagram and Twitter. And these people correspond with each other and send each other messages. And it's a community all to themselves. It is wonderful. So they say about their symptoms and how they can help one another. They raise funds. They will sit in a bath full of baked beans to raise money for the ME Association. It's tremendous. And the other thing we do, we fund research. We have spent over £1 million in the last few years on research into this illness, all thanks to the people that give us money. Have we had any money from the government? Not a jot, naught, zero, zilch. Until 5 weeks ago, we had no money for physical research into this illness from the government, and yet it affects 250,000 residents of this country. 5 weeks ago, we eventually got some money, and they're going to look into the genome of people with ME. So things are looking up. Well, thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope this hasn't been too much of a down presentation about this illness. So I'd like to cheer you up, because I always find that with chronic illness, a bit of humour lightens the day. And some years ago, I was at a conference in London. It was a very, very long day. I was there from 8 in the morning till 6 at night. And when I got back to my hotel room, oh, I was tired. So I undid my tie, took off my jacket, chucked off my shoes, and collapsed on the bed. Oh, it was a dream. And I was asleep for about 20 minutes. And I woke up, and on the side table, I saw a Gideon Bible. So I picked it up, I opened it, and there on the flyleaf was written, "If you are tired and weary, turn to Jeremiah 32. And underneath somebody had written, "If you're not, phone Lulu on Soho 839-674. Well, if you were tired and weary, I can't recommend phoning Lulu, but I can recommend pacing, taking your time. I hope, of course, you never get this illness, but if you know someone, perhaps, or their carers, say there is information out there. Tell them about the ME Association and the work that we do, and we will respond. We do. We care about people with ME. Thank you for listening, and I hand back to whoever's going to take the questions now. Thank you.